They don't hide the truth because it's complicated. They hide it because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You were trained, not educated, conditioned, not prepared. And the most dangerous part, you think this system is broken. It's not. It's working perfectly. Working people stay busy. Busy people don't ask questions. And people who don't ask questions never notice the game was rigged before they sat down. This isn't about money. This is about control. Let's start with a hard truth most people feel but never articulate. School didn't fail to teach you about money. It succeeded at teaching you something else. From the moment you were a child, the system trained you how to behave, not how to think. Sit down, be quiet, raise your hand, ask permission, follow instructions, wait for approval, get rewarded for obedience, punished for deviation. That's not an accident. That's behavioral conditioning. If the goal of school were independence, the first subject would be money. How it works, who controls it, how debt traps people, how taxes shape behavior, how assets produce freedom. Instead, money is treated like a taboo topic, something too complicated or too risky for students. Why? Because financial education produces people who don't need permission, and systems that rely on control cannot afford too many independent thinkers. Think about it. No one ever explicitly told you, we are training you to be a worker for the rest of your life. That would be obvious. That would trigger resistance. So instead, they shape the environment so that outcome becomes automatic. This is how psychological influence works at scale. You are trained to trade time for approval. Approval for grades. Grades for credentials. Credentials for a job for a paycheck. And once the paycheck enters the picture, something subtle but powerful happens inside the brain. Your curiosity shuts down. Neuroscience tells us that certainty reduces exploration. When survival feels handled, the brain stops scanning for alternatives. That's why the promise of job security, pensions, and steady income is so effective. It doesn't just pay your bills, it pacifies your thinking. This is why the most dangerous moment in a person's financial life is their first stable paycheck, because comfort feels like success, even when it's actually confinement. Now here's the part most people miss. Teachers are not villains. Most of them don't know this either. They were trained by the same system. They followed the same path. They succeeded inside the rules, so they unconsciously defend the rules. That's why Chase Hughes would call this inside versus outside knowledge. Inside knowledge comes from people who play the game. Outside knowledge comes from people who study the game. School gives you outside theory. Real financial education comes from people who have skin in the game. That's why wealthy mentors teach differently. They don't give lectures, they give pressure. They don't pay you right away. They test your psychology. They want to see if you think like an employee or an owner, because the moment you pay someone, you change how they think. They stop asking why and start asking how much. And that's the trap. Schools optimize you to be employable, not adaptable, to follow systems, not build them, to wait for instructions, not design outcomes. That's why risk is discouraged. Failure is punished. Mistakes are graded, not analyzed. But in the real world, mistakes are where intelligence is built. The system doesn't want you dangerous. It wants you predictable. Predictable people show up on time. Predictable people pay taxes without questioning them. Predictable people work their whole lives and wonder why freedom never arrives. And here's the darkest part. Once this conditioning is installed, the system no longer has to control you. You control yourself. You say, I'll do it later. That's risky. I'm not ready. That's not stable. That's not your voice. That's training. Financial education is not about learning numbers. It's about unlearning obedience. And the moment you realize school was designed to prepare you for employment, not independence, you stop blaming yourself. You see the cage. And once you see it, the door becomes visible. That's where real education begins. This is where most people misunderstand the game, because they were trained to, from childhood, you're taught a simple formula. Work hard, get paid, be safe. It sounds responsible, moral even. But psychologically, it wires your brain to serve money instead of command it. The rich don't reject work. They reject dependency. There's a critical distinction here that almost no one explains. Working is not the problem. Working for money is. The moment your survival depends on a paycheck, your leverage disappears. Your time becomes the commodity. Your energy becomes rented. Your decisions become reactive instead of strategic. This is why Chase Hughes would call wages a control mechanism. Not because they're evil, but because they shape behavior. When someone controls your income, they influence your choices, your risk tolerance, and even your beliefs. This is why employees defend systems that don't serve them, because the system feeds them. Now, contrast that with how the wealthy think. They don't ask, how much do I make per hour? They ask, what produces cash flow without my presence? This is not semantics. It's an identity shift. When you work for money, your focus is effort. When money works for you, your focus is structure. The rich build or acquire assets, systems that produce income repeatedly. Real estate, businesses, royalties, licensing, equity. These things don't care if you're motivated. They don't require daily willpower. They execute automatically once designed correctly. This is why wealthy people obsess over leverage. Leverage is using systems, people, capital, or time to multiply output without multiplying effort. Employees have almost no leverage. Owners live inside it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want assets. They want reassurance. Assets feel uncertain. Paychecks feel safe. But safety is an illusion created by familiarity. Ask yourself this: how secure is a job that disappears when the economy shifts? Technology replaces you. A manager changes. A crisis hits. That's not security. That's conditional permission. The wealthy understand something psychologically crucial. Money is attracted to control, not effort. Effort is respected. Control is rewarded. This is why rich people don't chase raises. They design environments where money flows toward them by default. Now let's address the myth that keeps people stuck. I don't have enough money to invest. That belief keeps you trapped in earned income forever, because wealth is not built by saving wages. It's built by redirecting cash flow into assets, even small ones, especially small ones, because they train your brain to think like an owner. And here's the darker part most people resist hearing. Once you work for money long enough, your brain adapts to it. You start optimizing for comfort, not growth. You avoid risks that threaten your income. You call that being responsible, but psychologically, it's self-preservation over self-expansion. The rich reverse this. They protect their downside, but they expose themselves to upside. They don't fear losing money nearly as much as they fear losing opportunity, because money is renewable. Time isn't. This is why they don't panic during crashes. They buy. This is why they don't complain about taxes. They restructure. This is why they don't beg for raises. They replace income sources. And here's the key educational takeaway. You don't stop working to get rich. You stop working only for money. You work to acquire assets. You work to build leverage. You work to escape dependency. The transition is uncomfortable, confusing, often lonely, because you're breaking a psychological contract you were trained to obey. But once money stops being your master and becomes your employee, everything changes: your decisions, your stress levels, your options. And that's when you realize freedom was never about having more money. It was about needing it less. Most financial failure doesn't come from laziness or bad luck. It comes from mislabeling reality. People don't go broke because they don't earn money. They go broke because they misunderstand what money is doing after they earn it. The most common lie people repeat is this: my house is my biggest asset. That sentence alone has destroyed more financial futures than bad investments ever could. Why? Because it confuses appearance with function. Chase Hughes would frame this as a perception problem. The brain doesn't respond to facts. It responds to frames. If you frame something as an asset, you treat it with confidence. If that frame is wrong, your confidence becomes expensive. So let's strip this down to its core. An asset is not defined by what it is. It's defined by what it does. And what it does comes down to one brutal question: which direction does the cash flow? If money flows into your pocket consistently, it's an asset. If money flows out of your pocket consistently, it's a liability. Simple, unemotional, unforgiving. Most people never learn this because they're taught nouns instead of verbs. They learn things: house, car, job, degree, but they're never taught to track movement. Cash flow is movement. A house that costs you money every month, liability, a house that pays you every month, asset, same noun, different behavior, different outcome. This is where the psychological trap closes. People buy liabilities and feel successful because society rewards appearance. Big house, new car, lifestyle upgrades. These symbols trigger social approval, which releases dopamine, the same chemical associated with reward. So the brain associates spending with success. Meanwhile, assets are boring, quiet, invisible. They don't signal status. They don't impress strangers. They don't give instant gratification. But they do something far more dangerous to the system. They reduce dependence. Assets don't require permission. They don't require clocking in. They don't require motivation. They produce income whether you feel confident or not. This is why wealthy people focus obsessively on cash flow, because cash flow creates psychological safety that doesn't rely on employers, governments, or markets behaving nicely. Now let's talk about why this misunderstanding is so widespread. School teaches linear thinking, work, get paid, spend, repeat. No one teaches circular thinking. Acquire asset, asset produce. CES income, buys more assets. Repeat. Linear thinking keeps you tired. Circular thinking makes you dangerous. And once again, this isn't accidental. If people understood assets, they would ask uncomfortable questions. Why am I working so hard with nothing to show for it? Why do my expenses rise faster than my income? Why does wealth seem to compound for others but not for me? The moment those questions surface, control weakens. Now, here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Your job is not an asset. It may pay well, it may be respectable, but if it requires your presence to produce income, it is earned income, not ownership. That doesn't mean jobs are bad. It means jobs are temporary tools, not destinations. Wealth is built when earned income is converted into asset ownership. This is where fear shows up. Assets require learning. They require mistakes. They require tolerance for uncertainty. Most people would rather be certain and broke than uncertain and free. So they stay in liabilities because they feel familiar. But here's the psychological pivot wealthy people make. They stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, will this pay me back? That single question filters every decision. Does this purchase increase my cash flow? Does it reduce my dependence? Does it move money toward me or away from me? If the answer is away, it's a liability. No matter how nice it looks, once you internalize this, your behavior changes automatically. Spending slows, evaluation sharpens, ego quiets, and slowly, almost invisibly, your life begins to stabilize. Not because you earn more, but because you leak less. And when cash stops leaking, it starts accumulating. That's when people say, you're lucky. But luck has nothing to do with it. You just learned how to tell the difference between an asset and a lie. Here's the ugly truth most people refuse to accept. The reason you feel broke isn't because you don't make enough money. It's because the system takes more than you realize and you don't even know it. Taxes aren't just a payment. They are a control mechanism. And it's not just the money you see disappearing from your paycheck. It's the mindset the system trains you to accept. You look at your paycheck and think, that seems normal. That's just how it is. But if you truly understood the scale of it, you'd feel violated. Most people don't realize taxes are the number one expense for most households. It's not rent. It's not food. It's not debt. It's taxes. And what makes it worse is that taxes are not just a number. They are a behavioral weapon. Because when you accept high taxes as normal, you stop asking the question that changes everything. How do I legally reduce this? And this is the difference between the poor and the rich. The poor say taxes are unfair. The rich say taxes are a problem to solve. This is the mindset shift that separates victims from winners. Now let's break down the concept that the rich use to win. There are three types of income: earned income, portfolio income, passive income. Earned income is your salary. This is taxed heavily because the system knows you have the least leverage. Portfolio income is from investments like stocks, dividends, capital gains, taxed less, but still taxed. Passive income is cash flow from assets. This is where the system it's tricky. Passive income, like rental income or business profits, can be structured to minimize taxes legally because the wealthy understand that tax laws reward certain behaviors. And this is not conspiracy theory, it's a fact. Look at the world's richest companies. McDonald's doesn't get rich from selling burgers. They get rich from owning real estate. Real estate produces passive income and tax benefits. Jeff Bezos built an empire where his wealth is tied to assets and business structures, not just salary. So how much tax did he pay on $16 billion? The answer isn't the point. The point is that the system is built to reward people who understand the rules. Most people don't even know the rules exist. And here's the brutal truth. The government wants you to borrow. They want you to buy houses. They want you to consume. They want you to be responsible because money is created through debt. When you borrow, you generate money. When you spend, you stimulate the economy. And when you do this without financial education, you become a tool in the machine. But when the rich borrow, they borrow for assets. They use debt as a weapon. They use other people's money to create cash flow. They don't borrow to buy liabilities. This is the difference. And here's the key educational takeaway. You can legally reduce taxes if you learn the rules. Most people don't because they're taught to fear the system. Fear keeps you compliant. Compliance keeps you predictable. Predictability keeps you controlled. Now, here's the most important point. You don't need to be wealthy to use tax laws. You need education. You need to understand the difference between I can't afford it. How can I afford it? Because that question forces your brain to become strategic. It forces you to think like an owner. And owners don't just earn money. They structure it. They move it. They protect it. They multiply it. This is the reason rich people can make millions and pay zero tax legally. Not because they're cheating, because they know the rules better than you. And the most frightening part, everyone could do it, everyone. But most people never will because they don't want to admit the truth. They've been trained to accept poverty as normal. They've been trained to believe taxes are unavoidable. They've been trained to accept being controlled. And that is the most dangerous form of power, not the power of the government, but the power of your own acceptance. So the question isn't whether taxes are fair. The question is whether you are willing to learn the rules, because the moment you do, you stop being a victim and you become a threat. This is the part where most people stop listening because it hits too close to home. You think your financial situation is a result of your circumstances, but it's not. It's a result of your internal language. The most dangerous word in your mind is not no. It's not impossible. It's not even fear. It's can't. Because can't isn't a truth. It's a psychological stop sign. When you say, I can't afford it, you don't just describe reality. You freeze it. You lock your brain in a cage and throw away the key. And here's the truth most people refuse to accept. The rich don't say I can't, not because they are special, not because they were born with golden genes. They don't say it because they were trained not to. They were trained to ask a different question. Instead of I can't afford it, they ask, how can I afford it? That question is dangerous to the system because it forces your brain to look for solutions. It forces you to think strategically. It forces you to take responsibility. The moment you ask how, your brain stops being a victim. It becomes a hunter. This is why poor thinking is so common, because it's easy. Saying I can't is a way to avoid responsibility, risk, and change. It's a way to remain comfortable, and comfort is the most powerful addiction you'll ever experience. The rich don't avoid mistakes. They seek them, not because they want to fail, because they understand that mistakes are how intelligence is built. When you make a mistake, you learn. When you learn, you grow. The poor avoid mistakes because they fear failure, but fear is a poison. Fear keeps you small. Fear keeps you safe. Fear keeps you poor. The rich understand something the poor never learn. Money is not a limited resource. Your mindset is, and mindset is not built by comfort. It is built by challenge. This is why wealthy people often look like they're lucky. But luck is just the label people give to someone who learned how to win. Now, let's talk about why I can't afford it. Is the most destructive sentence you will ever say, because it doesn't just stop you from taking action. It stops you from even seeing action. When you believe you can't, your brain stops scanning for opportunities. It becomes blind. And once you become blind, you begin to believe that life is happening to you instead of through you. That's when poverty becomes genetic. Not because of your bloodline, but because of your thinking pattern. If you grow up hearing we can't afford that, you begin to internalize it. Your brain builds a story, money is not for people like us. And that story becomes your identity. You don't need a bank to deny you. You deny yourself first. But there is a way out. You start changing your language. You stop saying I can't. And you start asking, how can I? How can I afford it? How can I learn that skill? How can I build that asset? How can I create cash flow? Those questions open doors. And once doors open, your life changes. But this is not easy because the system will resist you. Your friends will call you crazy. Your family will call you unrealistic. Your own mind will call you unsafe because growth is uncomfortable and comfort is what you've been trained to seek. So you have a choice. You can keep saying I can't and remain trapped, or you can start asking how can I and become dangerous. Because once you start asking, the world stops being a prison. It becomes a challenge, and challenges are where winners are made. The system doesn't need to trap you. You trap yourself by repeating ideas you never question. No one is coming to save you. No teacher will hand you this knowledge. No institution will volunteer it. Because once you understand money, you stop being predictable, and predictable people are easy to control. So the question isn't, can you get rich? The real question is, are you willing to unlearn everything that made you comfortable being broke?